In 1997, the world still believed the future of entertainment was in a physical store. You walked into a building, picked a movie, paid, and returned it later. That was the rule. That was the system. And nobody questioned it. But in a small apartment in California, two men were about to challenge that system. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph didn't want to build a company. They wanted to solve a problem. Reed had been punished by a late fee. It was a tiny amount, but it ignited something inside him. He saw a system built on guilt, on punishment, on forcing people to return a movie on time. He saw a system that didn't respect human behavior. So he asked a simple question. What if renting movies was effortless? What if the customer never felt trapped? What if entertainment was free from rules? They started Netflix with a few $1,000s, a small website, and a bold promise: no late fees. The idea sounded insane. They were competing against a giant. Blockbuster was the king. It had thousands of stores, massive advertising, and a brand that felt unstoppable. Netflix had none of that. Just a dream, a tiny team, and a belief that the world was changing. In the beginning, Netflix was a DVD by mail service. People ordered movies online, and Netflix mailed the DVDs to their homes. It sounds simple today, but back then, it was revolutionary. The problem was that people didn't trust the internet. They didn't trust online payments. They didn't trust a company with no physical store. Every month, Netflix burned money. Every month, their debts grew. Investors were nervous. Critics were loud. This company won't last, they said. It's a fad. People will never abandon Blockbuster. But Netflix didn't panic. Instead, they did something few companies do. They listened to their customers. They studied their behavior. They learned what people loved and what they hated. And they noticed something crucial. People didn't want late fees. People wanted freedom. So Netflix doubled down on that promise. They built a brand around trust. They didn't want customers to feel guilty. They wanted customers to feel respected. And that simple change made Netflix a cult brand. But the real turning point came in 2007. Netflix introduced streaming. At first, it was a small catalog. A few movies, a few TV shows. It didn't feel like a revolution. But the idea was massive. Streaming meant no shipping, no waiting, no discs. Instant access. It was the beginning of a new world. However, the world was not ready. The internet was slow. Connections were unstable. People still loved physical media. Netflix could have failed right there, but they didn't. They quietly built the infrastructure, improved the technology, and waited. They waited until the world caught up. And when it did, Netflix exploded. By 2010, streaming was no longer a niche. It became a movement. But Netflix had a secret weapon that nobody saw coming. It wasn't technology. It wasn't marketing. It was data. Netflix tracked every user. What they watched, when they watched, how long they watched, and what they skipped. Most companies would sell this data to advertisers. Netflix did something far more powerful. They used it to create content. Netflix stopped buying shows and started producing them. And they didn't guess what people wanted. They knew. They used data to predict the next big hit. And then, they made it. In 2013, Netflix released House of Cards. It was a bold move, a risky move, a show that cost millions. But it worked. It became a global hit. It changed the game. Netflix was no longer a streaming platform. It was a studio, a content machine, a cultural force. But with great power comes great risk. Netflix began spending billions on content. Their debt grew. Critics returned, louder than ever. Netflix is burning cash, they said. They are doomed. They will go bankrupt. The numbers looked scary. The spending was enormous, But Netflix was playing a long game. They knew the future belonged to the companies who owned content. They knew the world was shifting from cable to streaming. And they were building a global empire. But Netflix also made one of the biggest mistakes in its history. In 2011, they announced a plan to split the company. They wanted to separate DVDs and streaming. They raised prices. They changed the brand. The public reacted with anger. The backlash was immediate. Customers felt betrayed. They felt like Netflix had abandoned them. The stock crashed. The company was in crisis. This was the darkest moment. Netflix could have collapsed, but instead, they did something rare. They admitted the mistake. They apologized. They reversed the decision. And they rebuilt trust. This moment taught Netflix a valuable lesson. The customer is not a number. The customer is a human being, and humans remember betrayal. After the failure, Netflix became more focused than ever. They invested in original content, but not just any content. They invested in stories that would travel across borders. They created shows that were addictive, emotional, and unforgettable. Stranger Things became a global phenomenon. Orange is the New Black changed the way people saw TV. The Crown turned history into drama. These shows did more than entertain. They created culture. They made Netflix a global language. People didn't say, "I watched a show." They said, "I watched a Netflix show." That shift made Netflix unstoppable. But Netflix's story is not just about success. It is also about constant struggle. The competition grew. Disney launched its own streaming service. Amazon invested heavily. New players emerged every year. The world became crowded. Subscriptions became expensive. People started cutting services. Netflix faced a new enemy: saturation. The company had to evolve again. They started experimenting with gaming, interactive content, and local language productions. They expanded into every country. They created shows in multiple languages. They knew the future was global, not local. Netflix understood that entertainment is not one size fits all, and they were willing to take risks again. Netflix is now a giant, over 200 million subscribers, a brand that defines modern entertainment. But the future is uncertain. The streaming wars are intensifying. The world is changing faster than ever. Netflix must continue evolving or it will be replaced. But if there is one thing Netflix has proven, it is this: they do not fear change. They create change. From a small DVD mail service to a global entertainment empire, Netflix rewrote the rules of business. They showed the world that innovation is not about technology alone. It is about understanding people, predicting their desires, and daring to build a future they cannot yet imagine.